involved, but we're very lucky to have Councilmember Betsy Sunderman with us to talk about the initiative that she has written and got through council that will be on the May 4th ballot, as well as the Smitherman initiative, which is also going to be on the May 4th ballot. So those are two ballot initiatives, charter amendments that are reactions to the bribery scandals that have racked city council in the last year or so. And these two amendments really are reactions to that. And I'll let Councilmember Sunderman really tell us what is in her amendment she is advocating. Both amendments were passed by City Council and will be before us on the May 4th ballot. So I'm going to turn it over to Councilmember Betsy Sunderman to lead the first part of this discussion. We may broaden this discussion into what's needed beyond these two amendments. As you know, there are lots of ideas floating out there. In fact, the Season Good Foundation has a major proposal for sorting through the various ideas and getting them before the public. So it's not a dead issue with these two ballot initiatives. But anyway, these are two lead-off initiatives that are dealing with this misconduct crisis that we've had in City Council. So Councilmember Betsy Sunderman, nice to have you with us. And you want to tell us about your amendment?
Thank you for having me. So I'm Betsy Sunderman. Nice to see all of you. Yeah, so my amendment, it is a reaction to all the bribery scandals. I worked on it for 7 months with the law department before speaking about it publicly. So I started about my first month on council. I contacted the law department and I said, things are weird around here. We need some ethics rules that we don't have yet. So after I started working on it, 2 more people got indicted. So the law department kept saying, what's your deadline for this? And I said, before someone else gets indicted. And they thought I was joking, but no, 2 more people got indicted. So we finally have a charter amendment. So it has 3 parts to it. One part is mandatory ethics training. And I know you can't train someone how to really be ethical. I mean, if you have a dirty person, they're going to be dirty, right? But for those of us who want to follow the rules, it's helpful to have training on open meetings rules and records requests and all that kind of stuff. Not every council member is definitely familiar with all that. So part of my charter amendment is within 60 days of taking office, you have to do an ethics training. And traditionally, there's been an optional ethics training at the beginning of each council term. And I don't know, some council members have taken it and some haven't, but the only way to mandate it is to put it in the city charter. For those of us who took office halfway through the term, we would then have to take it independently, either online or through the Ohio Ethics Commission. So there are different ways you can take it. So I was never mandated to take ethics training, which I think is crazy. So we mandate all of our employees take it, but the only way to make an elected official take it is to put it in the charter. The second part of my charter amendment says that if you are charged with a felony involving your job on council, you are suspended from voting on anything at council or proposing new legislation. So you can still be a council member, you can still fill people's potholes and take care of their, street lights and all the basic service stuff. You can still get paid because you're innocent until proven guilty, but you cannot be charged with bribery and then come in and start proposing legislation or vote on other people's legislation. So right now there are 2 ways to suspend or remove a council member, and they're both torturous processes. One is through the Attorney General's office. That one's not so torturous. The Attorney General just has to decide to suspend you. But it does take a series of weeks and hearings and judges to make that decision. The other process is through the Hamilton County Probate Court, where I used to work. And 4 citizens have to sign a complaint and go in front of the judge. Then the judge kicks it over to the city. The city solicitor has to stamp it with their approval. Then it goes back to the probate judge. It's a long process, and it depends on citizens to do it. The Attorney General one depends on an Attorney General who wants to do that. So we need an internal city mechanism to be able to do this. Otherwise, we might have PG Sittenfeld and Jeff Pastor sitting there today trying to vote. Luckily, they both voluntarily agreed to being suspended, thankfully. But if they hadn't voluntarily agreed to that, they'd probably still be showing up. And I think that would be a huge problem. So then if someone's convicted of one of these crimes involving their job, then they are kicked off of council. So they wouldn't have to go through probate. They wouldn't have to go through the Attorney General. They're off of council. So for example, if Jeff Pastor enters a plea, then he would be kicked off of council. And then his replacement right now would supposedly, hopefully stay on council. So the third part of my charter amendment, before we're sworn in, usually the day that you're sworn into city council, they have you fill out a designee form where you pick one or more council members to select your replacement if you are off of council for some reason, if you die, if you take another job, if you're indicted, whatever. So I selected my designees. Part of my charter amendment is that after you're indicted for a felony, you can't change your designees. So we saw that happen this year with my colleague, Jeff Pastor. After he was indicted, he came in and he said, now I want to change my designee to Wendell Young. And we all thought, that's weird. Why would you change your designee after you're indicted? So I think once you're indicted with something, you should lose the ability to do certain things because then your motives are at question. So you can't change that. And then I can tell you a little bit about Vice Mayor Smitherman's charter amendment. I don't want to speak for him, but I can tell you my understanding of it if you're interested.
That would be good. Yes, I think that would be very.
Ours overlap a little bit. I asked him if he wanted to combine them, and he said no, he'd rather have them separate. So that's why they're separate. So his has 2 prongs to it. One is that you can't change your designee once you're charged with a felony. So that sounds familiar. That's also in mine. So of course I like that. The other part of his, which I also like, is that if someone tries to suspend or remove a council member through that probate court process that I explained, where 4 citizens go in and it goes in front of the probate judge and then it goes to the city solicitor, the city solicitor is then kind of in a jam because the city solicitor is our lawyer as city council people. So like we ask the city solicitor about ethics issues all the time. So it's very possible and likely that Mr. Pastor has been getting ethics advice from the city solicitor for the last few years. And then that puts our city solicitor in a bad position where they then have to decide if a case should continue to suspend someone for being unethical. So how would you like your own personal family lawyer to have to decide if you were getting prosecuted for something? That's not fair because they know all your dirty secrets, right? So Vice Mayor Smitherman is proposing that they have to hire a special prosecutor, which is an independent lawyer who's not connected with the city, to make that decision. And I was a prosecutor for 15 years through the Hamilton County Prosecutor's Office, and I served as a special prosecutor in Claremont County, Warren County. When they have a conflict, they always appoint a special prosecutor, so there's no shenanigans going on. We don't want any more of that. So I like Vice Mayor Smitherman's charter amendment. I hope you vote for both of them. And since they overlap a little bit, but they don't contradict each other, both of them can pass and they won't cancel each other out.
So these are the two amendments that we voters face on before or the days before or on May 4th itself to be voted on. Some responses or questions for the council member on those two ballot initiatives. Any thoughts about that?
Everybody loves them. That's great.
That is good. Elizabeth Brown has a question.
Yeah, I think that we hesitate because it's not so much about the details of the charter amendments. It's just the sense that, wow, that's not really going to fix a whole lot. It looks like we're doing something, but in fact, we still have the situation there that gave rise to the problems we have now. So maybe if you could expand a little bit and address whether you think there are other root causes. You know, it looks to me like we have a culture down there, not of unethical behavior, but a culture of rampant development subsidies that give rise to this. It's almost like the city is bribing developers, offering them money in order to do something, and it loses the punch of having an individual, you know, take a bribe when the developers are doing it all the time.
Well, I mean, I think politics in general just draws people kind of with these personalities sometimes, these people who just kind of want power and want money. And I mean, I don't think that describes me, but most of my friends are not super impressed that I'm on city council. They say, why are you doing that? That sounds terrible. But for a lot of people, I mean, they do this job because they think it's glamorous and powerful. And then when they get into it and they realize we don't really make a lot of money, maybe they want to live this big life. I don't know. I mean, I can't explain why people are unethical, but I do think politics draws that kind of personality sometimes. And I know that the developers are the big villains this year in all the stories, but I can tell you there are a lot of community groups, social service agencies that are probably doing this kind of stuff with council members too. I mean, I don't think the developers are the dirty dogs. I think that every group that wants money from the city has these dirty characters in it. So I don't know if we definitely need some change with development, developers, all that kind of stuff. And we have a committee that's going to try to figure out better ways for us to contact or not have contact with developers. That's great. But I think it expands to all different entities in a council.
Are you talking about the commission that David Mann wants to look at this?
Yes.
And is that functioning right now?
I know all the members have been chosen. I think he only gave them until May to come up with guidelines. So I hope that they're meeting. I don't know that for sure that they've met, but I would assume so.
The issue that Elizabeth brought up bothers me too. I hate to show my age, but 20 years ago, I was very involved, and several of us, Alice Schneider, who's also on this call, in putting forward a charter amendment that dealt with money in politics. Big money in politics has been a problem for, you know, since television, and that became such a factor. And people, I can remember talking to Councilman David Mann about when he was in Congress back in the 1990s, and they had that phrase dialing for dollars, that every person that was running for national office at that time, and that's carried over to the local level. So that's why so many of us got involved back in 2020 or 2001 is when we passed the charter amendment that put in contribution limits. We did have public financing as part of that package, but some developers and big businessmen fought that and got public financing taken off that a year afterwards. They had an amendment that took the public financing of elections away, so that never went into effect. But it seems to me, and I don't want to hog the conversation here, that money in politics is still a big deal at all levels of politics, including the local level. And, just look at the state legislature in terms of the scandal there with Householder. So it's impacting everywhere. And do we need some further either ordinances or charter amendments that get at this two-way street of development and money in politics? So that's the question I pose all of us to wrestle with a little bit.
Yeah,
I don't know whether, yeah.
I mean, most I can take from anybody is $1,100, and I'm not going to sell my soul to the devil for $1,100. I think where the issues come in are these like dark money groups or the personal PACs people have. And I mean, a candidate is allowed to have a PAC, but I'm not going to do it because that's where, things get really gray, and I don't want to enter I mean, who knows, maybe someday I will, but I think it's not a great idea. I think that's where things get a little murky and confusing. So that's where you see people getting in trouble. That's where PG got in trouble.
Yeah, and of course, part of the problem with the money in politics, it's gotten even worse with the Citizens United case of about 4 or 5 years ago, which equates corporations as people. And so a corporation goes along with that earlier court case that said that money is speech. And so if you say a corporation or a union or a group like that is a person, then they have free speech, and free speech, because of an earlier case, said you can't dabble with that. So you can put contribution limits on, but there's this whole problem about these alternative PACs and things like that. So it has gotten a lot more complex in how to get a handle on this.
But ultimately, council members do not have that much control over development. I think people think that we are out there selecting projects, and it's our city administration does that. They pick which projects get funded. I mean, if there's corruption or things to be changed, it might not be with the city council members. I mean, our vote really isn't that powerful unless we start micromanaging the city administration. And that's what we've seen, where council members are stepping out of our lane and trying to put forth motions to micromanage the administration.
Yeah, that's a very good point, because.
But if I could, don't you think part of the problem is that almost every developer gets some money from the city, or some advantage or some incentive from the city, that it has become so common that any developer doing anything in the city comes to city council and with their hand out and expecting something. And council does do that. I mean, they don't turn down projects. They think that no one's going to develop unless they give them something.
But by the time it gets to city council, it's already gone through the city administration for a year or 2 years. I mean, we get it at like 11:59, right before midnight. So we don't have the opportunity, and we shouldn't, to be selecting projects and things like that. So I'm hoping David Mann, one of the things his commission does is say that we should stop micromanaging projects. I mean, like we saw this with Children's Hospital at the last minute. It was all in line, and then we had all these demands, city council did. And we saw it a couple of weeks ago with Liberty and Elm down in OTR. The developer had followed all the rules of the city administration. And then at the last minute, some council members said, we want you to change your development to have XYZ, or we're not going to vote for it. And I think that's where things get weird. I mean, that should all be through our city administration. We set up the policy for our city administration. So
where are they? Where are the policies that say that not everybody gets money?
Well, I mean, I have developers contact me all the time who say they don't get money and they're mad about it. So, I mean, I don't know maybe we're talking to different people, but people say, why do they get it? And I don't get it, So I don't know if that's.
And that's part of the problem, that developers go to city council people. whether they've gone to the administration that's going through the process, they still seek out city council people, and that's what happens, you know. And so there's just there are no good checks and balances for that. There just aren't right now.
I think they should be able to come to city council members, but I don't think we should be able to vote on things along the way. I think that's where the ethical issues come in. I mean, someone can meet with me all day if they want, but if I don't have any voting ability, then it doesn't help them to do that, you know? But we can't set up a system where we say developers cannot meet with us, but all the people opposed to the development can meet with us, you know? That's not fair to say neighbors can meet with us, community councils, social service agencies, business owners, they can all meet with us and tell us why they hate a development, but the developer can't, you know, be there to tell their side. I don't think that's fair. So
well,
I think
the developer should go and talk to city council as a whole. He shouldn't seek out individual members and try to, you know, get votes from individual members. And if they went and presented it as a whole, maybe that would be better. I don't know.
Well, they do that at the very end, but you're saying they should do that at the very beginning? Or
no, I'm saying that rather than going and seeking out individual council members, that there should be, if they have something that they want to present or say, or an argument against the many community members that may be disagreeing with what they're doing, which is what happened, you know, in Elm Street. And the reason that some city council members came out against that is because of the community members, you know, they're voters who said, wait a minute, you know, what happened to the affordable housing?
Yeah, but I mean, if a developer comes to me and says, oh, I want to put something great in Price Hill where you live, I say, that's awesome. Go talk to our city administration. It sounds great. Go talk to our city administration. And that's what council should be doing. We should be telling them to go to the city administration. And then if you pass through all their stuff and all the policies that council has set up, they have this whole rubric for how they judge things based on what we have told them to do. Then if it passes through all that, a year or two later, it'll come in front of us for a final vote. So I think the system isn't broken, but I think council members are doing things that are unethical to mess up a system that's in place.
I'd just like to say that the community was there from the beginning, even before these developers, like for the Elm project, showed up. And as we saw, there was an opportunity to get some affordable housing done, but it was simply rejected by the mayor and members of council. So I would like to, but I really appreciate you taking the time to talk about these important subjects, Ms. Sunderman. I was wondering if you had any thoughts or comments on some of the other proposed reforms that other members of council besides yourself and Mr. Smitherman have put forward.
Such as?
I don't know the details of them that closely, but I think Councilman Seelbach put forward one, and there were some other ones, I believe. I'm not 100% sure about that, but also there's a charter amendment I was wondering if you could talk about, and the need for affordable housing.
You're talking about the $50 million charter amendment?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I don't love that charter amendment. I don't think that's the way to solve an affordable housing crisis. I think it would, I mean, it's a defund the police charter amendment.
No, it's not. No, it's not. I'm sorry, it is not.
But the only way we can fulfill that charter amendment is to defund the police department.
You got to be creative.
That's totally not true.
No.
Okay, well then how would we fund it?
Well, I just sat through a LISC webinar, and there were people from Washington, somebody from the state, two local people, and the city has its priorities. The city's always had its priorities. The city's priorities have been things like the banks and FC Stadium. If city put its priorities on affordable housing, there would be no problem finding that 50 million.
So tell me what.
There's several ways to fund it. All right, there's several ways. The charter amendment leaves it open to the ways the city decides to fund it. You know, the realty transfer fee, the developer transfer fees, taxes from public land that's sold, ballot initiatives, which is what we're doing. Dedicating, well, first of all, our city thought we could use that 17 or 18 million from the railroad fund as part of it. They are willing to let the city come up with ways to fund that. It does not have to defund anything else.
The ways they suggested in the charter amendment, most of them are, a couple of them are not in line with state law, so we can't do it.
It was written by a city solicitor, John Kerp, who used to be a city solicitor, wrote the charter amendment. It went through legal aid, and
oh, I didn't know that.
yes, and they checked. He wrote the whole amendment, and legal aid checked it out. So I think it does.
Yeah, well, I think some of the things in there are not ways, like we cannot sell the railway and use that toward affordable housing. That is precluded by state law.
Well, they don't have to sell it. They don't have to sell it. They can just use that 17 or 18 million that comes in each year from it.
The charter amendment says we should sell it. That's the problem. A lot of the things in the charter amendment for how we would come up with the 50 million are not doable.
I think the charter amendment would just simply mandate that City Hall fund affordable housing, and it leaves it open to the way that City Council would do the heavy lifting. But there's lots of ways that cities do this around the country, and I think that the City Council could look to do some creative things. It could be a combination of things. We funded the bus system with a 0.3% earnings tax from 1973 to 2020. That's just one way. It wouldn't have to be a 0.3% earnings tax, or it doesn't even have to be earnings tax, but there's lots of ways that we could do it, but it doesn't seem like there's any willingness to really have a serious discussion about it from council.
Yeah, I mean, you could raise earnings tax. I don't want to raise earnings tax. I know one way that we're trying to do it, we have an affordable housing subcommittee, and we're going to set up a group to solicit private donations from some of our big companies in town.
That's wonderful, but none of them have committed. And, we've had several years of trying to get this done, quite a few years, and none of them have committed or stepped up to champion. And that charter amendment group has said all along, hey, look, if somebody from the city or from, a philanthropist or someone from a corporation would step up and champion this and say, I'll be the one to spearhead this and get the money, they'll drop that amendment in a minute, but nobody has done that.
I think if they would have phrased the charter amendment to say 5 million or 10 million or something, but I don't think $50 million is doable without someone being able to tell me what we would cut from our budget, or that we would have to significantly raise taxes. So I don't see a way that it can happen.
I think from the citizens' point of view, I think what we see, and we don't necessarily know all the details, but we see whenever the council wants to do something, and look at the stadiums, huge amounts of money, and they found ways to do it. They found creative ways to do it. And it's like, when you want to do something, you find ways to do it. And when you don't want to do something, you say it's defunding the police. I mean,
no, if it were a $5 or a $10 million proposal, I would not say that it's a defund the police charter amendment. But when it's $50 million, then I do think that's what it is.
Yeah.
Is there a number that you would commit to fund affordable housing? Do you believe that the city of Cincinnati should put some investment into affordable housing?
I mean, I guess it depends what you mean, because everyone means something different by affordable housing. This charter amendment is requesting units that are lower rate units, but not that are low income housing units. So I think if you want to solve a problem where people at a certain adjusted median income, like 30 to 50% or 50 to 80%, something like that, you would have to put in either rehab houses into like homesteader programs to get people into lower rate homes where they could be homeowners. I'm a huge fan of that. Or you'd have to create more housing units that are government subsidized and based on people's income. If this charter amendment passes, I know from talking to Josh Spring, he said he does not want people to have to show their income to get these low income units. He just wants the units to be cheaper. So I don't know if it would solve the problem of having people with low incomes have affordable housing. It could be rich people living in cheaper rent apartments. So I think if you really want to tackle the issue of affordable housing, the units have to be based on someone's income.
Well, they are. To qualify, you have to be below
No,
50% AMI or below 30% AMI.
no. I don't, that's not true. From reading the charter amendment, that's not true. And from talking to Josh Spring, he said he would not want people to have to show their income. He just wants a lot of low rent units.
We subsidize so-called market rate housing heavily. So like, for instance, the Liberty and Elm project, which is on a streetcar line near Finley Market Music Hall and a brand new stadium, we subsidize that heavily without any incentives to make them do some affordable housing. So I don't understand why, when it comes to affordable housing, there can't be any sort of subsidies to help make this happen and incentivize developers, but we give away incentives for development like it's there's always money for that, it seems like, from council, even if it's future revenue that we will not have to meet our basic needs.
So do you think every single new development should be required to have low income housing in it?
I think that we have to change our city policy to really get serious. We basically have subsidized getting rid of affordable housing units in downtown and over the Rhine and now other neighborhoods. So I think that, yeah, we have to have a serious shift. And I think that's why people felt desperate to take it to the people and the ballot initiatives that you're seeing. It wasn't a first resort, it was a last resort.
But do you think every single development that gets city money should have low income housing in it?
I think that Liberty and Elm one should have, that's for sure. And I live in this
Like,
neighborhood.
you don't think every development should have to have that?
It has
Only,
some affordable-
only those that get city money, not every development. If they want to do it on their own and be really truly market rate and not be subsidized by the city, then that's fine. They can do what they want. But when they come to the taxpayers with their hands out, yes, that works for affordable housing and it should not be necessary if it's supposedly market rate.
Well, but like in my neighborhood in Price Hill, we are way oversaturated with low income housing. I mean, we have way too much. So if a new development went into our neighborhood, it would not make sense to me that you would require a certain amount of that to be low income housing. That doesn't
Only
make
if the city money's in it. Don't subsidize it then. If it's not, if it's a market rate and they're able to, and the market will accept it, then there's no reason for the taxpayer to be there handing out a subsidy.
Well, then we get back to the point that if it's really going to be low income housing, you have to show your income. You have to, I mean, otherwise we're going to end up with high income people living in high end buildings just for a cheaper rent. That's what this charter amendment is saying. You do not have to show your income.
Bill, we can't hear you. Bill, you're on mute.
I have these same issues.
But I do like that black and white camera.
Okay, we are having technical issues here, so good luck. All right, now we've got it.
No, I was just thinking that in terms of what Josh told you, I think in order to qualify for affordable housing units, they show their income then, but they don't show it before the affordable housing income units are available. So when it's not, well,
No,
it's certainly not. It's certainly not in the amendment. It's certainly not in the amendment.
Well, it's not in the amendment that you would have to show your income and that you would have to be at a certain level income. And I asked him about that and he said, we just want lots of units that are low rent. He said, we don't want it to be based on someone's income. We don't want anyone to be embarrassed and have to show their income. So I said, it could end up being a bunch of rich people living in these buildings and just paying lower rent. And he said, well, yes. He said, we would just kind of trust the landlord to try to figure out who's high income and low income. And that's, how can you do that how can you do that?
Well, I think we're going to have to just disagree on that interpretation. Getting back to Josh's or Justin's point initially in terms of other proposals on this whole question of development and bribery and payments. I think one proposal that was put up either by Council Member Mann or maybe it's another council member was having a ban on contributions by the developer to council members during the period that they are involved in promoting a development for themselves. So that's one seems very tangible proposal to me that would go to the other side. I think that one of you were bringing up, we never punish the developer. It's always the person that's receiving the money or something like that, but often it's,
Sorry, go ahead.
So that is one proposal, that if a big developer has a proposal, a long-term proposal that's going through the city, that they are not allowed to contribute funds to the council member's campaign. That's not prohibiting it forever. It's during that period where they're going through this development process.
Yeah, well, I can address that. So the first thing is it takes a year or two. I mean, they're involved with the city for a year or two for these big developments, and even sometimes for small developments. So by putting that restriction on, you're basically saying they can never donate to any council member, because it's not like they just have something in front of us for a month, it's years. So, I mean, if that's what you want, that's fine, but it would be like they could never donate. And then I think the only fair thing to do is if developers can't donate, then all these other groups that come to us for money also should be banned from donating. It doesn't seem fair to pick one group over another. We have tons of social service agencies come to us and ask for money. So I don't, again, I mean, the developers are being vilified because they're the ones who are involved with all these indictments. But I would say there are dirty characters in each type of business, and we would have to ban all of them from donating.
Well, social service agencies, if they're 501c3s, have to be nonpartisan. So I don't know how they're going to be donating much.
Well, but they still, I mean, council members get donations from all kinds of social service agency, people who work there, friends of theirs. I mean, lots.
Other thoughts and comments on this whole question of both the ballot initiatives that are on the current May 4th ballot and other thoughts about other reforms?
I was curious, Ms. Sunderland, you mentioned earlier that you thought that the $50 million charter amendment was way too much, but you had sort of thrown out a figure like 5 or 10. I was wondering if there was a number that you would be comfortable with for council to sort of go for affordable housing when it comes to city policy. And do you think that if we funded more affordable housing, it would impact the budget of public safety, for instance? A lot of calls are for people that are just sort of dealing with basic needs, whether it's mental health services or other issues, but people on the streets don't have much security. So how do we address that?
Well, you asked me this before, and then I asked you a question in response and you didn't answer it. So I'll ask you again. How do you define affordable housing? What does it mean to you? What are you asking to be funded?
Well, affordable housing is 30% of one's income. That's the government's.
That's not the government's. I mean, affordable housing can mean any different thing to any different number of people. It can mean low market rate. It can mean 0 to 30% AMI. It can mean 30 to 50% AMI, 50 to 80%. So how do you define affordable housing?
Well, I guess my question to you would be, how do you define it, and would you address this housing crisis that we're dealing with? Because I'm not running for office, so you're the one that I think that, council has this responsibility to address this issue.
Yeah, I don't define it anyway. I always ask people how they define it because every group defines it differently. I think it's good to have rents come down in the city to become more affordable. And I think the best way to do that is to build tons and tons and tons of units. I think when you have a market that has a lot of units, I think rents come down. I think we should help people make more money to be able to afford more rent. Also, what I was telling you before, on our affordable housing subcommittee, we're talking about this. And I think we need to leverage these companies who are in town to help us raise money, and we can allocate money from the city budget to the Port Authority to take a lot of our vacant buildings and make them into affordable housing. That would solve a lot of issues. It would get rid of vacant buildings, which then reduces crime. It would make some of our neighborhoods look nicer that have a bunch of vacant buildings. I mean, we have thousands of vacant buildings right now. I would like to pump money into those and make affordable housing that way.
Other questions or comments? And they don't all have to be directed to council member. We don't want to put you totally on the spot. This is an open discussion of both this whole question of misconduct in council, plus we've gotten over into the whole affordable housing issue, but we don't want to direct everything that you have to answer on the spot, how you're going to handle this. Other thoughts for this whole general discussion and things that we still need to address in the coming months? Any final thoughts from you, Councilmember Sunderman, in terms of?
Yeah, I mean, if you guys ever have any ideas for me, I know the corruption stuff, it's hard to solve. I mean, I guess you just have to stop electing people who show you that they're unethical. That's one way to do it. And then we're going to get a whole new crop of council members this time. So we need to really look into people and their ethics, and if they have any issues in their past that might lead you to believe they might be unethical. I think there are 80 people who want to run, so we'll see how many of us can actually get our petitions done, but we're going to have a lot of people running. So hopefully there are groups like yours and a lot of groups who can kind of vet all the candidates and figure out who the best people are, so we don't end up in this mess again.
Are there actually 80 people?
80 people pulled petitions
okay.
to run for council. Yeah, I mean, with COVID, it's been really hard getting 500 signatures because there are no events to go to. So I'm assuming a lot of people won't get 500 valid signatures, but we're going to have more people running, I think, this year than ever before.
And of course, in the May primary, we've got the mayoral candidates, and we're going to try to focus on them and have a few, at least 3 or 4 of those at the next forum on the 25th of this month.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts by our esteemed group here? You're all quiet. So, well, we can go home early since we're not serving lunch today. And hopefully we'll get back to that soon. I see Tom Bennett there, who's always passing out the lunches at our forum at Christ Church. It's good to see you, Tom, and we hope to get back there soon and have those good lunches. So we will let you get to your lunch now if you haven't had it yet, and hopefully see you in 2 weeks. And thank you very much, Councilmember Sunderman, for joining us and talking about your amendment and other related issues.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Have me back anytime. You're like a group that actually knows what I'm talking about. It's pretty cool.
Well,
Like I can tell you all actually like keep up with things and you're like educated about all these things. So that's really cool because that does not describe every group I have contact with.
well, we try. That's one of the reasons we do these forums is we have a pretty diverse and intelligent group of folks that tune into these. So thanks again, all of you. Sorry we had some technical difficulties, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Bye.
Bye.